Yo, I'm Bob. Into Marvel. Happen to be totally blind since birth. Talking about X-Men 97, Season 1, Episode 10, Tolerance is Extinction, Part 3. This one premiered on May 15th of 2024, day after the premiere. And I'm sad because we have no new episodes of X-Men 97 to look forward to next week. That being said, there are spoilers ahead, so you might want to watch the episode or you're going to get spoiled. Jumping right in, and you have been warned. So when we meet Magneto for the first time and enter Magneto, we get this story beat with Professor Xavier when Jubilee asks about Magneto, who he is. And we learn that, Professor Xavier met Magneto during a very turbulent time in both of their lives. And I love this one part of the episode where Xavier says something along the lines of, we revealed to each other our long hidden mutant powers. And that's a scene I always wanted to see play out in animation. I always wanted to see a younger Charles and Eric talking together. And we got that in the opening scene of this episode. It's a flashback, but at the same time, of course, they're in Eric's mind. And as Xavier is talking to Eric, you have Turn, Turn, Turn going on in the background. And that is a song that was pleading for tolerance, pleading for peace in the 60s. And it's such a great selection of music to go with that scene, because on one hand you have that flashback with Eric and Charles, and they're talking about the dream, Xavier's dream, and that's when Xavier reveals to Magneto telepathically, hey, I'm a mutant, this is what I want to do, this is how I think the world should be, we need to try and plead for peace. And Eric is just, he's seen so much even up to this point. Of course, then we realize, we've known that they're in Eric's mind. And it's just after Eric has totaled Wolverine, just after he's ripped the adamantium out of his body. And even now, you've got Xavier pleading for Eric to undo the damage that he's done to Earth. Or else, Charles says he's going to be forced to stop him, by wiping his mind, and Eric is still not listening. I like that bit where he says, well, why don't you turn back the nostalgia to my childhood, and why don't you find out what happened to my village when they used reason while others used tanks. And that is a direct quote that Eric said from Deadly Reunions. So such strong callbacks in this episode to some of the very early episodes of the animated series. And so then you've got that moment where Charles is like, okay, I'm going to have to do it. And that is when he reverses what Eric does, what Eric has done to Earth. And I'm thinking, as this scene's going on, oh, okay, he's doing the thing that my brother told me about a long time ago. Are we going to get the Onslaught entity in this episode? And I thought, well, probably not. He might be showing up next season because they're linked. And, you've got that psychic blast fired by Charles. And for the majority of the episode, these two are in Eric's mind, because now Eric is, he's real messed up for the majority of the episode. He doesn't really remember who he is. But Charles still feels like he has to save him, because Eric's pain, everything that he's gone through, all the hatred that's been directed toward him and, mutants, people like him, it's threatening to overtake him. It's like he's been in this part of his life for decades. When someone is unspeakable to you, you tend to relive it in certain parts of your life. And it's like your mind always flashes back to that one moment when you felt the most humiliated, when you felt the most hated. There are certain instances that might cause you to flash back there. But for Magneto, it's like it's all the time for this guy. And you can see throughout the episode that the waters that keep rising in this bar, they symbolize that pain that is threatening to overtake him. And Xavier is trying to reason with him, trying to get him to leave this particular point in life, trying to get him to rise above that, trying to get him to realize that he has a family, that he doesn't have to suffer alone with this pain. At one point in the episode, I like how he says, well, your pain, it can drown you. And that's what grief does. That's what pain does if you try to go at it alone. And I like where, Eric sees Rogue, and later on Xavier reminds him that there are other people that maybe our pasts are directing us to help us fight that current, to keep our heads above water, to try and stay above the pain. We can help each other move forward. And so that's kind of what these guys are up to for most of the episode. Xavier is trying to help Eric out of this particular point in his mind, and that pain is threatening to overtake them both. And there is a very real chance that Xavier might be lost too. But I like how, even though he's had to do the unthinkable, he's still trying to keep Eric from drowning. He says even if it means he's lost too, he's not leaving his brother. And that's exactly how he sees Eric, as his brother, even though they've hurt each other so much up to this point. I've said it in other X-Men97 videos. They have been through a lot. They've been through so much to help them bond, to strengthen that bond in the original animated series. The Savage Land, they found Magneto's kids together. They've tackled the Phalanx. Magneto was there with him when everyone thought Xavier was about to meet his end. They've already been through so much, and now they're right back to where they started, but Xavier's still not leaving this guy. Because he really values him as a friend, as a brother, as family. And of course we have Bastion, who just chews scenery in this episode. So while Xavier is doing his thing with Eric, I love this massive fight scene that we get, because you've got things looking bleak at the very beginning of the episode. There's a great scene where Bastion is toying with Cable, and he's basically describing the futility. Well, he thinks it's futile for Cable to try and stop him. And he's got Cable telling him just how many times he'd attempted to save his mom. And Cable says 200 times. And Sinister's still controlling him. But then, of course, I think one of my favorite scenes is when we've got that Phoenix Force, that bit of Phoenix Force that revives Jean, and we get the Phoenix theme as she comes forward. And it's a theme that takes me directly back to 1994 when seeing the Phoenix Saga for the first time. Phoenix Saga Part 5, I think, to be exact. They actually were able to use the Phoenix theme. And there were a lot of great character themes in the original series that really haven't been touched on in X-Men97. We got to hear Cable's theme briefly. We got to hear, of course, the Phoenix theme. And they do little renditions of the main theme over and over again in 97. So many different characters had themes in the 90s. Mr. Sinister had one. Bum, 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 bum. You had, Storm had her own theme. Wolverine had a theme. Rogue had a theme. I really wish in future seasons, if they were able to, they could kind of revisit some of those, because it was it was quite a musical show. Everybody had little incidental beats when it came to their themes. Practically everybody. Apocalypse had a theme. Magneto had a theme. But, anyway, I love the scene where Phoenix comes forth and she just breaks Bastion's hold over the Prime Sentinels. The mnemonic scrambler is repaired, so he's cut off from everybody. And he was so sure of himself up until this point. And, it's awesome because she lets him know, hey, these people didn't decide to be a slave to your personal hatred here. And Bastion being Bastion, after these people are freed, he's done with the whole thing. He's going to go up to Asteroid M, and he's going to bring it down on Earth by targeting the gravity core. But we do get one last scene with Mr. Sinister while, Sinister has been controlling Cable and kind of torturing him along with Bastion. Then you've got Jean Phoenix, who grabs him and basically unravels all that mutant DNA that's been holding him together. And now Sinister just, I think, according to the audio description, his face is very aged. It's got a lot of wrinkles, a lot of liver spots. But I like the fact that he's still around. He is so afraid. This is like one of those times, just like when Sinister had been blasted by Cyclops, where, I mean, he's not used to being hurt. He is not used to feeling like he's in danger, because he does that thing where he's like, he's just kind of whimpering. And he's done that a couple times before, just when Cyclops has been really going at him with those optic blasts in the original show. But when Morph turns into Sinister and he's like, somebody showed me my face, and Morph, he shapeshift into Sinister. Sorry, they shapeshift into Sinister. And Morph's like, well, it looks the same to me. Sinister just kind of whimpers, and that's the last we see of him this season. And I like that he kind of slinks off. I hope that he makes a deal with a certain someone next season. I'll get into that at the end of the video. But, I mean, the remainder of the episode, you have Bastion going up to Asteroid M, and he's trying to bring it down, because now he's not wanting to bring the Earth into his future. He's not wanting to enslave them. He's like, well, if I can't have it, nobody can. You know how he is. He's throwing a tantrum because his plans are going awry. Now he's just going to wipe everybody out because he's just throwing a childish tantrum. That's kind of what he's up to. I'm really glad he's doing stuff in this episode. The last one, he was just kind of hanging there, but he still had his moments. But this episode, especially where, after the Phoenix does what she does, and then she kind of goes her merry way, he yanks off Cable's freaking cybernetic arm and is beating him with it. I really wanted him to go down right then and there. And then I think he uses the arm to give himself, what's that one meme say, a final form. It's an action figure I really hope we get. He gets more android armor on him. He's got all these robotic muscles that pop up everywhere. He's got armor plates. He gets these big wings. It sounds like something out of an anime cartoon, the way that he might look. I don't know, because the audio description track didn't really have a lot of time to describe it. But and then he's got that down pointing triangle, I think, on his chest that, of course, made me think of Nimrod, because that was raised up on my old Nimrod action figure. Maybe it's an homage to Nimrod. But yeah, that's what he's up to as he goes off toward Asteroid M. And everybody's trying to tend to Charles and Magneto. And of course, you've got Wolverine, who, well, he's not doing anything this episode. He's kind of down for the count, which it does make sense, because he's got the adamantium ripped out of him, and you've got Morph there who's tending to him. But there's a massive fight scene with Bastion and the X-Men up in space. And it's one of my favorites, because you've got Rogue, who starts the ball with his name is Gambit, his name was Gambit, remember it, quote, and she just waylays him. That's one of my favorite scenes, because she's punching the mess out of him. I think he goes through a wall. She does this massive hand clap, which really hurts the guy. It's to the point where I think his jaw is dislocated, and it must look really creepy, because he's down for the count, but he gets up and he's all twisted around. He's got to twist his hand back into position. He's got to fix his own jaw. But he's Bastion, and that's kind of what he does. And I like that no matter what they throw at him, he's just relentless. As Nightcrawler says when he's kind of flying around, teleporting around, punching him, oh my God, he is the future incarnate. So you've got Nightcrawler doing his thing. Jubilee is going after Bastion with the pyro stuff. You've got Sunspot with his solar energy there. I think one of my favorite scenes is when Cyclops just does this massive optic blast. I think a lot of people online have said that it's the "Behold, optic blast" from the Marvel versus games, which that was always one of my favorite lines that Norm Spencer said in the video game. I had, I think, all of the Marvel games when I was a kid. X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter. Yeah, it's really cool to know that that might have been an homage to Marvel. I wonder if Psych did that in the comics before the games, though. Maybe the folks who worked on Marvel saw it in a panel. I don't know. It's probably done in the game first. I wonder what came first, though. If anybody knows, let me know in the comment section. It's one of my favorite things in the world, though, when Cyclops just goes ham with his optic blasts. And he really did that to Bastion, too. I'm glad Forge is okay. I think he was supposed to be tending to Cable. So we get a lot of cameos throughout the episode, and the audio description track does let me in on a few of them. Like it mentioned Daredevil, who was beating up some thugs. I found out online that I think we see Doctor Strange. He wasn't mentioned in the audio description track. I read that Alpha Flight was shown briefly. We saw them in Repo Man back in season 2 of the original animated series. And Bo DeMeo on Twitter, he pointed out that we get to see Peter Parker and Mary Jane, or Spider-Man and Mary Jane. And I'm probably willing to say that this is the one from the 90s cartoon. So as Bo says, he finally found her. And I want a Spider-Man 98 show where, we go back and find out how that happened. I have been wanting that since that went off the air. So cool to find out on Twitter from one of the writers that Spidey finally found her. I want that show now, like yesterday. That would be awesome, actually. I like that one scene where, Bastion is mocking everyone for being empathetic, for caring, and he's saying that, well, you guys, you call yourselves a family, but you're just fighting together until you die alone. And he thinks that this Sentinel that's landing is part of his family, but it it lands on top of him, and you find out that Beast is inside the chest along with the other X-Men. And I love how Hank was talking about how, the Greeks, they did love their Trojan horse. And, he mentions irony. And it was one of my favorite scenes because it's just like Beast to be at the helm of a Sentinel, working the controls. I always love these moments with Beast so much. And you have... It's one of the longest fight scenes in the show. And it's something I've been waiting for all season because, when I was first introduced to Bastion in X-Men The Next Dimension, my old video game, I loved him as a character, loved fighting with him. He was one of my favorite characters to play with just because of his really cool moveset that he had. And I've been wanting to see what the writers had in store for his, I don't want to call it a moveset because it's not a video game, for all the things that he could do. And he really put out the stops. I think at one point he fired a beam from his mouth. And it's just a really long, but I think spectacular fight scene with Bastion and the X-Men. I like this one bit where Jubilee is going after him with her pyrotechnics, and he says something like, "What do you plan to do, child? Slay me with the 4th of July?" And she's like, "Well, it's not like I haven't heard that one before." And I'm reminded of the Unstoppable Juggernaut, in which he says, "What's this? The 4th of July? No one told me." That's one of the lines from season 1 that always made me laugh when I was a kid. And I'm sure Jubilee was probably thinking of Kane Marco as Bastion was mocking her, and she just keeps firing stuff at him. And I like how she ultimately she makes the Sentinel head fall on top of him. He's really getting his butt handed to him, but he just keeps going. You've got Cyclops, who tries to reason with Bastion. He tries to do what Xavier has taught them to do over the years, to reach out with compassion. But Bastion's not hearing it. He's just not capable of listening to it. And then you've got that beautiful scene where, Scott thinks this is his last hurrah. And he has Jean reach out to Cable. And he's like, "I'm doing what I should have done in the first place. I'm saying goodbye. I made the mistake of not doing that before we sent you into the future. And this is it." And it's such a great scene because you have Scott, telling his kid that he loves him. And, Cable, I love that, even though we didn't get that moment in the original animated series, in the sequel here, he's talking about how basically all the stories that the people who raised me told me about my folks, well, it didn't do my folks justice. And it was just such a beautiful moment with these characters, something that I've been waiting for since I was a kid. And I like how Gene was able to help him, take off his glasses, and he actually got to look at his kid. Such a powerful scene. Boy, that was awesome. And of course, you have Bastion, who, he just decides to go out with the gravity core, and I guess he gets stuck inside of the core. I guess he implodes, but I hope we're not done with this guy, because 3 episodes with this character I love to loathe, that doesn't seem like quite enough for me. I would like to see him come back at some point or other in the show. It all comes down to the X-Men trying to avert the asteroid. And while all this is going on, you've got President Kelly, who activates the Magneto protocols in spite of what T'Chaka is telling him. And by the way, I love that cameo by King T'Chaka there. And you've got Captain America trying to get him to listen to reason as well. But he fires those missiles. And you've got the missiles. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, but the asteroid is breaking up and everything is bleak. But here is where you finally have Xavier and Magneto, and Xavier finally gets him to realize, hey, we're still family, and we need you to do what you do. And I love that bit where Magneto comes back to himself and says Magneto lives. So I think he's decided to live, and he saves Earth along with the other X-Men. It's one of my favorite scenes because I feel like he has hopefully started his journey out of that part of his past, because he does realize that he has people who he can lean on. He has mutants that he can depend on, and they all do their best to and they do manage to basically blow the asteroid up. And I love how we flash forward 6 months later, and I'm like, oh no, this is going to end on a big cliffhanger, isn't it? And right away we get that bit on the news where Graydon Creed is ahead in the polls against President Kelly. I'm like, oh no, Graydon's still there? I thought Sabretooth told him in his the episode Bloodline, which we haven't gotten to in my animated series reviews yet, but we'll get to that one if you haven't seen that one. But yeah, I like that Graydon's probably going to be showing up in season 2. So we're probably going to have to hear a lot of this in season 2 about how mutants are the enemy. I don't know. Forge is looking for everyone because no one knows what happened to the X-Men. And I love how Bishop walks in there. We haven't seen him since the 3rd episode of 97. And here he is letting Forge know, well, this isn't our first the X-Men are dead rodeo. Poor Bishop has had to keep going into the future to, revert this catastrophe, avert that catastrophe. And here he is again. He's like, now we got to go rescue the X-Men, Forge. You don't know me yet, but you will. My name's Lucas Bishop, and the X-Men are, scattered through time because something or someone has pulled them away and through time. I'm wondering if it's Kang. I don't know, but it could be what we're going to be talking about right now, because we see most of the X-Men winding up in ancient Egypt, 3000 BC. And right when the audio description track let me know that, my first watch, I was like, oh my God, they're going to see Apocalypse before he's Apocalypse. They're going to see En Saba Noor. And I was like, come on, do it, do the thing. And we do get that because we have Magneto. He's there. We got Rogue, Beast, we have Nightcrawler who shows up there. We have Xavier show up there. And it's such a great scene because, yeah, we have these men who are fighting against Noor, and we have Magneto fending them off, and he wants to know the guy's name. The part where he says, "My name is Insaba Noor," I was like, "Oh God, this is going to be such an awesome second season." And then you've got Scott and Jean who have gone into the future. You know, they're pulled away from the rest of the team, and they're getting to actually raise Nathan because they see him as a teenager. They're with the Ascani clan and Mother Ascani. And if she is who I remember who she is, I think her name might start with an R, Rachel. I think we're in for a really awesome season 2. It's so great that they actually get to do what they did in the comics. I think they go by Red and Slim in the comics, and they're actually going to be able to spend some time with Nathan as a teenager because that's where they're dropped on the timeline. I think it's 3960 in the future. And it was such a fantastic episode. I was glad that I was basically trained to stay for the mid-credit scene because in present day we have Apocalypse as Apocalypse. You know, he's got his armor on. I've been waiting to see this guy since he possessed Fabian Cortez in the Fifth Horseman, and he's back. He's in Genosha, and I don't know who they got to do the voice for Apocalypse, but I love the voice for Apocalypse. It's not as he doesn't sound like he's going to laugh as maniacally he did later on in the original animated series. He sounds a bit more sinister, not to take anything away from Mr. Sinister, but where he grabs up that playing card and he's like, "So much pain, my children, so much death." And I'm like, oh my God, you're going to bring Gambit back as Death. In the comics, it's Wolverine, but I'd like to think that maybe both of these guys could be Horsemen if they wanted to. So my final thoughts for season 1, it was fantastic, but I wish it had been longer. That didn't take away from me really enjoying the heck out of all 10 episodes, but I wish it had been longer. In season 2, I hope that we get to see Mr. Sinister make a Faustian deal with Apocalypse to, get his youth back. I actually hope that this Sinister turns out to be a clone, as we find out in the comics, and that Apocalypse was the one who actually gave Nathaniel the secrets of immortality. I don't know if they're going to swing it that way. They've already done an origin episode with Sinister and Descent, but who's to say that might not be a false memory? I don't know. I would like to see Onslaught in season 2 at some point. Maybe emerging as everyone is in ancient Egypt. I would love to see an Onslaught versus Apocalypse throwdown. I know we don't get that in the comics, but I mean, it's animation and the writers, they're loosely adapting things from the comics. I wouldn't mind an Onslaught versus Apocalypse fight at all. Wouldn't say no to that. I do hope we get to spend a bit more time in present day in season 2. I know we're going to be in Egypt and future timeline a lot, which is amazing. I cannot wait to see what that's going to look like. But I know, Omega Red is out of stasis now. We got to see him. I really want to see what Juggernaut and Sabretooth and Mystique and Blob, Pyro, and Avalanche are up to. I don't think we saw them this season. Kind of still wonder if Mystique is kind of hanging around. Maybe she's disguised as Valerie Cooper. Maybe a double or something. Maybe she's posing as her. I'm not sure what's going on with all that, but so I liked the movies okay, right? I think after the original animated series was over, I saw all the movies, all the X-Men films, and I had a pretty good time with them. But this team right here that I stumbled across in the early 90s when I was a kid, to me, these are always going to be my X-Men. And I love the way that they tell stories through this animated series, because just like in the original animated series, there's more time that you get to spend with the characters. You don't just tell 3 stories or thereabouts and then get rebooted after, 4 or 5 years or so. You do get to spend a lot more time with these characters. And I mean, I still really enjoyed the movies, and I'll go see the new MCU X-Men, sure. But this right here is what I was actually looking for when I watched those movies. X-Men Apocalypse, I didn't get the chills that I hoped I'd get when the big bad showed up. When he showed up at the end of this season, I got those. When I heard that voice for the first time during the mid credit scene, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I should be feeling when Apocalypse shows up. Just a fantastic first season. I hope we get 5 of these or more. I know one of the writers is not writing for the show anymore, but I mean, Marvel, Disney, you can always go to the writers who wrote the original. You'd be crazy not to, guys. Use those resources. Continue this level of storytelling, character development, cliffhanger endings. This is what I have been wanting from Marvel for a long time. And yes, I've seen the MCU movies. I've liked them pretty well, actually. But I think the X-Men are always going to be the characters that I keep coming back to in this continuity right here, because it's freaking awesome. I don't know what else to say. Love season 1, can't wait for season 2. I'm going to be going back and continuing to review the original animated series. I'll be doing Dark Phoenix starting May 25th. I think that's where we left off before 97 started airing. And I will hear you guys then.